Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we're excited to welcome JJ, Natalie, and Emilie, the three sisters from Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. So, JJ, let's start with you. Do you mind taking a moment and introducing yourself?
Well, I am lucky to be the oldest. I am the boss of the three of us, Lance. My background is corporate America. About 13 years ago, I stepped out entrepreneurship, and about 3 years ago, we took over full-time care of our mom. So a really mixed bag of tricks is what we say.
Sure. Natalie.
Next. All right. Well, my name is Natalie, and I am the middle sister, otherwise known as Yellow Mustard. Gray Poupon sits above me, apparently. And so I am the middle. And the cool part about all three of us is that we're all 2 years apart. So that's really nice. So it gives people a sense of our age, although JJ is the oldest. And so my background is I'm married. I have 2 wonderful dogs and a husband. And I have worked in the mental health field as an executive for the last 25 years. And I have been responsible for caring for other people's children and families and helping them to get the services they need. And I live in sunny Virginia.
Ooh. Wonderful.
Virginia. And I'm Emilie. I'm the baby, of course.
Who just had a birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yesterday was my birthday. Woo! Yeah. Proud mama of 3 adult children. And since 2019, I've been caring for mom, and I have a background in government.
Okay. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for your time today. And Natalie, I just want to say, because I have 3 children, and you know what they say about the middle child.
We're the best.
Well, close. It's the rose between the thorns.
Oh, yes. That feels so right.
Yeah,
everybody loves mustard. Just remember that everybody loves mustard.
That's rough, Lance. That's rough.
I'm just saying for our family. I'm not saying anything for you guys, but okay. So the 3 of you have come together to create the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver because of your mother's experience needing more help and assistance. Now, being that there is 3 of you and there's different age ranges, JJ, do you believe that the responsibilities are different for you being the oldest of the 3 of you?
So our story kind of started with Natalie. Her husband had cancer, and that really is where our journey started with the reluctance. And we always sort of felt like, she said it best, we felt really reluctant in our ability to be caregivers. When it comes to mom, her Parkinson's started when she was 48, and then she was diagnosed at 52. And our dad passed away at 58. And we like to say, what was he thinking? He left us.
We couldn't believe he did that.
Yeah.
It was very much, he ruined our plan.
Yeah.
That was our caregiving plan.
Yeah. He was the plan. And once he passed, I have always felt responsible. Our parents were really young when they married. They were high school sweethearts. And my mom and I were like friends. We were like best friends. And so after dad passed, I did feel really responsible for mom. And we all did. But as her illness progressed, she had a medical episode where she'd had too much medication. The cocktail was wrong. She had too many doctors in the mix in 2019. And I had to come in from North Carolina. It was really a challenge to deal with her then. My problem with having more responsibilities, or I feel they're self-imposed, is that I feel like you guys will probably shake their heads. I also have the most guilt when we have to make the hard decisions. The girls are like, yes, make this decision. It's the right decision. And even when it's the right decision, I feel guilty about the decision. Sure. So
what's an example of a decision that made you feel guilty?
Oh gosh.
I mean, is it every decision just because you're having to make it?
No, but okay, we're Southern, and everybody's supposed to age in place.
Right.
And so when we came to the point when we brought her back out of, she had a Parkinson's psychosis. So she had so much medication that it led us into hallucinations. It was really an issue. And when we brought her back home, we couldn't care for her. She ended up at and she's open to say she ended up at a psychiatric facility in Florida that dealt with Parkinson's and those type of medical issues. And we brought her back. Thought, of course, your parent is supposed to age in place. We all feel like that. Family should take care of her. I could not manage her. I ran my own businesses. Natalie works full time. Emilie was working, and we had to put her in assisted living. And it was overwhelming for me emotionally. Yes. That was it. And it was this guilt of I should be taking care of her 24/7. And I know that will every decision again, but that was really the first where it was like, I owe this to Dad. I owe this to our family. But then you think my health, I can't do it.
Right.
And so that's like I got to get some therapy. Natalie's going to be like, you get to get some therapy to get past this, JJ.
Well, and I'm sitting there. JJ was concerned about putting her in assisted living, and Emilie and I had gone to go look at some facilities, and I'm like, sign me up. Wait, I'm 46. No, I was earlier 40s. And I'm like, wait a second, they won't let me in yet. So I'm trying to see if my husband can get in, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this assisted living facility was getting our mom out to do more than what her current situation was. Because I think you have to look at, she was living independently and she was having people come in and out because we all three lived in different states. That was the other piece. And so what our mom needed was socialization and full engagement with the community, and with our work schedules and our ability, we couldn't do that. So instead of like saying, well, what do I personally want? What's in the best interest of our mom and will help her maintain a healthy, independent lifestyle? Because that's where I think a lot of people make decisions based on what they want versus what's in the best interest of that individual.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So, Emilie, you're now the full-time caregiver for Mom.
Yes.
How is that affected and changed your role as the mother-daughter relationship? And what are some of the obstacles you've had to overcome?
Absolutely. It totally affected our mother-daughter relationship. I had to take the role of the caretaker, her advocate. So roles were we were conflicting at times because she felt that I was punishing her when I was just honestly trying to keep her safe.
Sure.
So it has affected that. And it's something we struggle with daily still. Because she's still there. She's still all there mentally. It's just physically that holds her back. So,
yeah.
And our mom, Lance, our mom is really independent.
Yeah.
She really feels strongly about her own opinions, like we all do. And so I think that's where some of the challenges are when you've got an individual who's so used to being independent and making decisions, and then you have to give up some of that, and you have shared decision making, or sometimes the decision is taken. I think that's hard.
Absolutely. And I think too, like JJ said, I have a lot of family in the South, and I think a lot of women are very strong-minded, independent, who are Southern, not that other locations aren't. I'm just thinking of I'm just speaking of personal experience. And the fact that, with your father's passing so early and young, your mom even was more so independent than she would have been if he hadn't have passed. Right. And how has that affected all three of your relationships with her? I mean, does she get upset with Emilie, then call Natalie, or how did...
No, she calls JJ. He's the authority.
That's right. I'm in charge.
Well, so here's the thing. JJ's always been in charge. Mm-hmm. And so because mom was a young mom, she was 19. So 19, 21, and 23 when she had us. Okay. And so, but Mom was really close to Jay. And so mom and dad both worked. And so JJ was in charge. And that is a common theme, even now into adulthood. JJ's in charge. And so I'm a pretty dominant personality. And Emilie is typically, she plays her role until she steps forward and says, look, ladies, I will be heard. And so, but JJ's always been in charge. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, oh, well, okay.
And were all three of you already pretty close as far as relationship wise?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Has it brought you closer together, or?
I would say it was, and this is me, I think it would be hard for us to be closer than what
you are. That's great.
But it has brought our forgiveness and our
grace.
It's made us stronger, because I listened to Em and she's so nice about it. But I know this has being 24/7, and I did respite 2 weeks ago, and I listened to her, and she's always been the caregiver. I laugh and say she's the one that brought the dog home from the bus stop. And we were like, where'd you get this dog? And she has the kids. And but to see what she does and to know that when she calls or when she texts, she's broken. And I'm, I'll step out and say it because watch her. She's the quiet one in the back. But when she calls and she's like, you got to help me. She will raise her hand. And that's when she says, you got to get somebody in here for 24 hours. And let's all hope that they show up, first of all, because I'm in Florida. Natalie's in Virginia. And then Emilie and mom are in Tennessee. So we're all over the place. And, but when she calls, it's like, you got to help me. And I think that's what makes us closer is we see the text, or when she doesn't text, you're like, there's a problem. We got to find Emilie. And so it's kind of like you're mind reading each other. Like, wait a minute, I know what's going on. So.
And we have a constant text stream that is involved. It really should be a book and clearly needs to be illustrated because we have lots of memes in there to help describe things that are going on. And so it's probably, we use humor a lot to connect and to get through some of the situations like you can't even make this up. And so memes help.
Yeah.
It sounds funny.
Yeah.
And we know each other inside and out. I mean, we know each other more than probably spouses do. And so we know our tics and when we need help. If I'm not responding, that means, okay, something's going on.
Yeah. You ask about mom, and I'll go back to that. So she does play us off a little bit from one another. At least she thinks she does. And we talked about this for a Wall Street Journal article a couple of weeks ago. She will do something to Emilie, and then they'll have a conflict, and then she calls me and she tells me this is what's going on. And Emilie has already messaged me and said, look, mom just spilt like the whole thing of milk and this and this and this on the floor. And she's saying that, I'm being mean to her. And she's like, Emilie won't let me have milk. I'm like, Mom, Emilie just said, let her pour the cup of milk. That was the conflict. So,
basically an APS complaint.
Yeah, it's, so it's, it's stuff like that. But she does call me to say, well, this is what's going on. And I'm like, hold on, let me get, you don't want to say that you have to treat her like a child. And that's where that conflict, I think, comes in, is you're having to change your role. But it's, it is a little difficult. So.
Emilie, what is the most difficult aspect of being the on-site, in-person caregiver for mom? I mean, you have great support from your sisters, but you're there kind of the boots on the ground.
Right. I think more it's a mental game for me. Like, how much time do I need to allot to specify for her and then still do self-care for myself so I can stay the best I possibly can be, so I can be the best caretaker. So that it's the mental game. Absolutely.
Yeah. Natalie, why do you think the long distance caregiving is just as important or equally as important as the day-to-day caregiving?
Well, I think that each of us have our own roles and our gifts and talents that we were given, and we know how to use them. And so being able to be a long distance caregiver doesn't mean that you are devoid of any responsibility. My job is really, I support Emilie because Emilie is in there direct. And so what can I do? And that's what JJ does as well. But, you know, when there are things that need to be done related to certain areas, I'm going to take the lead on that.
Right.
Or I'm going to be able to come back and I'm 10,000 feet in the air looking down and saying, okay, it's not like you can't see the forest for the trees. Okay, well, it sounds like this. What if we were to do, what about this? Oh, it sounds like this. What about this? But I think, you know, I did go in with JJ for like a hot minute for the caregiving respite, which I was like, oh, I'm not cut out for this either, Jay. And so we did videos because we thought that would be funny because, again, we use humor to help with stress. Right. And that's how we kind of respond to it. Otherwise, you'll just cry all the time. Right. I think that caregivers need to have other people who support them too. And it's not just the individual, the caree that you're focused on. I honestly, especially now having been a caregiver myself with my husband, I know my focus is really on how do I keep Emilie sane and give her the support and love and the ear that she needs. And not necessarily just coming in saying, do this with like this pointy finger, do this, do this, this, you're doing it wrong. I'm not there to tell her to do it wrong. I'm like, dude, you're doing awesome. Yeah. I'm a cheerleader and people need validation.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. How have your spouses responded to this? And I'm thinking especially with you, Emilie, with having, you know, mom move in. I mean, was there a conversation or was that, have her come? How did that work?
I mean, lucky me, I was single
Okay.
at the time. So I felt like I could give more of myself rather than, you know, splitting that up with my spouse, potential spouse. So, but it's been a balance of me still having a social life and being with my partner and working that out at the same time. It's quite a juggling act.
Sure.
I brought her to North Carolina right after we had the health issue in 2019. That's initially where we brought her and put her in assisted living, Lance. And even not moving her into the home, but having her in assisted living within like 5 or 10 minutes for me, that was really hard on my marriage. And probably one of the reasons, and he's a very patient person, but Mom was, you know, it's kind of funny. Can you bring me some Cokes? Can you bring me some chocolate? I was like, you got to be kidding me, because I was also running my own business. And I have to say, if I was not running my own business and I was still working in the banking environment, there's no way I could have had that freedom to go back and forth to Florida to take care of her health, to go and get her during the situations, take her to the doctor. But it was hard for us. It was like, well, what's for dinner? Well, I'm over here at Mom's. You know, I'll be home at 9 or 10 o'clock. But it also, and I think on all of us, I know for me and Em specifically, emotionally, there's a toll on all of us, but for us physically as well. And that's just us. I gained weight. I was just, you know, mentally, I was exhausted. But in our relationships, that for me, at least, that was really interesting to try and say, okay, hold on. Mom's chips versus I need to go home and make dinner and spend some time with my family. So,
yeah. So, and our mom was texting JJ at one point almost 100 times a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And so let's just be really real about it. We had looked at placing my mom in Virginia because we had looked at facilities in Virginia, and Emilie at the time had lived in Virginia too. And JJ was in North Carolina, and JJ and I we only lived an hour and a half from each other. And so, but my mom likes JJ better. And the relationship between the two of them is way better.
I'm not sure that's a good thing. I'll interject.
And so I knew that, and my mom and I, out of the three of us, have a strained relationship. We're not as close as the girls. I'm going to be really honest about that. It's not that she doesn't love me, I don't love her. It's that we are so much alike that it is probably not in our best interest to spend quality time together at extensive amounts of time. And so, I knew that I would not be able to, with my job, be able to go back and forth like what I think she would need. And JJ said, let's bring her close to me. And
Right.
North Carolina had better professionals for her needs.
True.
So again, it came back to her need. And so the better doctors were in Winston-Salem than in Roanoke, Virginia. And so we made a calculated decision on what made the most sense and what was in the best interest of mom. And then ultimately, when it was having such a negative impact on JJ, then we moved her back to Tennessee because she could be closer to her family, people she knew. The doctors in Tennessee were good too. She had lived there. That's where she was from. And so she had the opportunity to see lots more people, went to church. That's where we grew up. But as far as like related to my husband and my husband knows that I put very clear boundaries with my mom. And so he knew that, unfortunately for me, my mom won't be able to come live with us. And so that's not an option. And what I love about my sisters is that they absolutely know that, and they respect that, and they support that decision. And they know that I will support them however I can.
Do you guys think you're the exception or the rule when it comes to siblings and caring for a parent?
I think we're probably the exception.
I think it's sad. I think it's sad that we're the
Well,
exception.
I will tell you, definitely are the exception. There's no thinking about it. And I just think it's fascinating that you're able to maintain even families that we serve with our professional business and families we've talked to on the show here. Relationships were strong and very well rooted prior to a parent getting ill. The parent gets ill and these relationships start to fray, because one sibling has one idea, another has a different one, and unfortunately, the parent didn't have any advance directives. They weren't mentally able to give consent for certain things, and so it's left to the children to figure out what did mom want or what did dad want. And thankfully, it sounds like mom is still cognitively sound, so she can still voice her opinion or text her opinion. But it's just remarkable that you guys have been able to, unite around this and stay together and stay on the same page. I like what you said, Natalie, where your sisters respect where you're coming from and what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. And Emilie knows that she has your guys' full support, and if she needs that respite, she can get it. What did you guys find interesting, or maybe not interesting, but what did you find to maybe be a myth or a misnomer about caring for another person, specifically a parent, when you first entered into this, arena?
I mean, me personally, we had plans for me to be able to work full time. That we thought mom was going to do great. If I was just in the home with her, she was still very independent, and that was not the case. So we did have to shift gears in that way, that she needed full 24-hour care. And we found different avenues that she goes to, like a daily living center, to give me a bit of a break and give, she needs that socialization also.
Sure.
But that was our biggest kind of wake up call financially for us, that, okay, I can't work full time.
Right. And I think too, a lot of times, and, JJ and I spoke about this previously, people have this misconception about what being a caregiver is. Social media makes it out to, not always, but more times than not, for somebody that's never been in it, they're not in the profession or taking it, during their personal life, they think it's all this perfect, just, making crafts and singing and, having a cup of coffee. And you guys named your show Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And I'm not trying to scare anybody away, but there is another real side to this where, you might be at kind of the end of your rope for the week, and you need that day to go out and just take care of yourself, Emilie, right? And, your sisters will come and, bail you out for, a time for some respite. What are messages you would want viewers or listeners to know about the other side of caregiving? Like the reality, the real picture. I mean, there are great days, right? But then there's going to be days where it's not.
I had the full sunshine, roses, kind of like, oh, when we move in, we can do all these items. Well, she wasn't able to do a lot of those things. I had to respect, getting her on a schedule. But it was difficult, just, letting other people know that self-care for me is the most important thing. It was just, I'm trying to think what else.
I think
self-care, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I think when I visited, and I think this is the hardest part, I didn't know what to expect. And I see mom about every 2 months. I talk to her more frequently, but even though we moved her out in August, she has progressively declined. And we watch that now. Instead of her being in assisted living, we are watching her decline, Lance. And so being a caregiver, I know Emily sees that every day. And to watch it, like she said, we thought it was going to be, oh, it's great. We're moving her out. We're going to go to the movies and do all this stuff. When I went in, I did a video for our, just a reel on Facebook, because I got up on Sunday morning, and it still makes me a little teary. I got up on Sunday morning, I got dressed, and I was excited. We're going to go to church and we're going to go to lunch. And Emily's not able to do that because she gets tired, but I'm going to be super caregiver. And it was so frightening to mom, and she got so much anxiety around it that I felt really defeated. And I felt like, well, I've failed this. And we have a lady that really is a mentor for us, Sue Ryan. And she said, sometimes you guys have to understand, you just have to meet that person where they are and realize that it's not about you. And I think that's one of the hardest parts for me, is I just have to realize that I have to meet mom. It's not about me being a super caregiver, but it's that it's only where she is. And that's hard. That's really hard to watch that person that you love decline, and you see them every day. And, so.
Is there go ahead. Sorry, Natalie.
Oh, I would say this, because I think this is the part where we haven't hit on. The reluctance started with me. And then I confirmed reluctance with the sisters from my own experience. The reluctance comes from where you feel like you can't do anything good enough, that you feel like I could have done this better, or I have to give this perceived, like we have to have these experiences and I'll give them a good life and I'll be able to do this. And and when you fail, it's hard, and it just builds on itself. And then there's times that, if we're really honest, that everyone will say something they don't mean to. Yeah. And you will feel like the worst human in the world. You will feel so bad about yourself that you have just said something. And I talk about this on the podcast in mine, where I said something very unkind to my husband. And there's no but, the word is and. And I felt pushed to my limit. And I said something so unkind that I regret even till today, that no matter how much I apologize, the girls know it. I called Emily immediately after I had said something ugly and cried to her and said, I can't believe I said this to my husband who has cancer. And she was like, Natalie, you're just human.
Yeah.
And just remember, so the reluctance comes not from not wanting to care for your loved one, or even if you don't like them. It's not about that. It's that the reluctance is our own insecurities that we place on, and the burden and this perfection that we place on ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
And just learning that we have to give ourselves some grace. That's the thing. It's about forgiveness. Like, you have to forgive yourself. The confession is forgive yourself, because you do have bad days. Like, we laughed. There were those days when I had mom and I had to take her to the doctor's office. She was wearing me out about something. I wasn't doing something right, because she's sick, and I'm okay with the fact that she's angry. She got Parkinson's when she was 48. She's younger than I am now, and she's mad about it. And that's okay, Lance. I mean, she can be mad, but Lord, don't be mad at me. And, I say sometimes, I was taking her to the doctor at Wake Forest, and she is lucky I didn't put her out on the side of the road. I was like, I'm done with this lady, and I hope somebody picks her up.
I'd be worried for the person who picked her up.
I know. But you have to give yourself grace and say, okay, I was kind of hoping that I put mom out on the side of the road, but then you're like, okay, I can forgive myself. It's, but everybody, you just got to give yourself grace, because, again, like Natalie said, you can only get pushed so far, and you have to know sometimes it is, Chris McClellan says it, sometimes it is the disease talking, and you just have to be like, okay, regroup with yourself, take a breath, and and just move on. But you got to give yourself grace, and you got to give yourself some forgiveness. And that's hard. That's hard to say. I'm only human, and I don't have to be perfect. And
what was the plan for mom for long-term care? Was it hoping an assisted living facility type setting would work, or was it always for her to just age in place in her home and maybe have help come into her home when the time came?
it was Dad. Dad was it.
We didn't have a plan. Yep. We don't talk about, we're good Southerners. No, we don't have plans. We don't talk about, you just die. You work until you die and you drop dead. And that sounds funny, but it's kind of true. And so because our grandmother worked until 6 months, she had cancer and she passed 6 months after she stopped working. But everybody works, and you don't have, like, I didn't know anybody who had ever gone into assisted living. We didn't, like, and if you go to a nursing home, that's where you go to die. That's what our mom says. And so that's the kind of that belief, like, oh, you don't go to a nursing home because that's where you die. And so when Emily and I went and took the visit of the assisted living, I'm like, sign me up now.
It was very posh. Well,
super posh.
Was mom hoping that would work, or was she still saying, I don't want to be here, I want to be in my house?
No, perception. She wanted to be at home.
She wanted to be at a home when she couldn't. She was falling. We were still having those issues. But when we say, it was our dad, that was our dad's plan as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he always thought with our dad's pension, the way they're financially were set up, our dad took the largest portion of his pension in the beginning because it was going to be he and my mom. And then after my mom passed, because he was going to care for her, he would be single when she passed, and he would be able to take the lesser part of his pension. That was their plan. There was no will. There was no POA. There was no directive. And I say this, when we got mom, we weren't thinking about it either, Lance. Right. I mean, and we are three, and you don't want to say this, so I don't want it to come across wrong. We are three well-educated young women, and we did not know what was going on. I did not know that the cost of assisted living, when I looked at it, was $6,000 to $7,000.
That's low too.
That's low,
right? Exactly. I'm going to say a really nice one.
Yeah, but people, and that's one of the things that got in us, especially with mom, and that's a big part of what we want to educate people for. If you don't know, if you have not planned, you need to get on board. Like, you need to figure this out. If you're taking care of a parent, don't forget that you need to take care of yourself, because we've talked to so many people who have been taking care of their parent, used all their resources to do that, and then they're left in the same situation. And this is such an ordeal, the caregiving ordeal. It's just going to continue to perpetuate itself. And it's scary. And again, we didn't know all this. We didn't.
Families don't talk about it.
They don't talk about it.
No, nobody talks about it. They don't talk about money. You don't talk about money. You don't talk about what it is. And there is an expectation, especially on females, that that's what you do. And if you go back and you look at Christianity, you take care of the widows and the children and the orphans. And so you just expect that. And what had we seen all of our lives? But it never would have occurred to me. We weren't a wealthy family. It wouldn't have occurred to me. But my parents also didn't save 401k. They lived paycheck to paycheck. So this is generational. It really is generational. And how do you change the trajectory of your children and their children by being intentional and comfortable, having conversations around money, having conversations around planning, and taking away the stigma and the fear around aging, and how do I want to be taken care of, and how do you want to be taken care of, and normalizing the conversation, which is what the podcast is meant to do.
Yeah. Emily, when does the time come, or will it come, where you're not able to provide or meet mom's needs?
There will be a day where her needs exceed what I physically and mentally can do. Mm-hmm. And, we've been preparing for that whenever that day happens. So I feel like I'm doing the best job I possibly can do. And when I feel like I can't do it anymore, then we'll take that next step. And I have a lot of peace about it. I feel like I've done everything I possibly can do.
Now, is that a conversation that you or the three of you have had with mom, and she's aware of? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think go ahead, Em.
We're very open about it with mom. Like JJ might say, don't tell mom this. And I'm like, we are very open adult to adult at this point. I mean, she still wants to treat me like the baby daughter. But we're finally got on a page that I'm an adult, she's an adult, and that's how we speak to each other. That I will be truthful and frank with her, because it is her life. She's independent. Right. She makes the choices.
Yeah. I will say that. Go ahead. I will say that one of the concerns that both Natalie and I share is that Emilie is only 45. And this was a big hesitancy for us in August because caregiving it's all encompassing. And like Emilie said, we thought she might be able to get out and work. She has not. It's hard to get people to show up to do her respite. Our family that's there is elderly. They can't help. And Emilie, she deserves a life. And anybody that's a caregiver knows we want Emilie to date. We want her to, 45 is not old. And
that's what I hear.
I know. And so at some point, I think I just, and you don't want to say it's not fair, but there's a certain point where mom is going to need additional care. But Emilie also, I can't sacrifice, and that's the word, I can't sacrifice Emilie's life. I can't do that. I can't live with myself to do that. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, and I'm guessing none of you would want her to look back in 20 years and have any resentment for the time also that she's maybe sacrificed.
It's true. It's true.
So it's called.
But we always said from like the get-go, JJ and Nellie both, when we see this is affecting you negatively, we're pulling the plug on this. It's just, we're not going to allow you to go down just by taking care of mom. So,
and that can be hard to see when you're close to it.
Right.
And so that's where the responsibility, and that's where self-interest has to be put to the side and caring for someone else. I have to, somebody could say, oh, well, this could negatively impact me if Emilie stops taking care of mom. Yeah, I can't take that because I'm not willing to sacrifice Emilie.
Right. Yeah. And you had adult children, Emilie?
I do. As adult, when I say my twins are 19 and my oldest is 21.
Okay.
They're borderline,
Sure.
But they're out on, out of their own college and stuff.
Okay.
So finally a little bit freedom. And then, I really prayed about it and God's like, this is what you need to do. Yeah. And I'm okay. We'll go back into a caretaking mode.
And I'll toss in the reason why we decided to do this in August was because we had moved to 3 different assisted living facilities. We had gone from the one in North Carolina. She had stayed in one for 2 years in Tennessee. They had asked us to move to a different one. And the third one, we lasted 4 months. And the reason was because of her Parkinson's. They weren't able to manage her medication.
Right.
So when they didn't do it correctly, we got aggressive behavior. It went downhill, and I can't blame her for that. But because of the way that she was medicated there, they just weren't able to meet her needs. And so basically we were asked to leave. And it was, okay, we have to put her in skilled nursing, or Emilie said, I'm not ready for that. And I'm going to do it. And when we talk about us agreeing or arguing about things, that was the point where Emilie and I both said, okay, let's do it. I'll support Emilie. And Natalie was like, I don't know if this is a good idea.
Oh, it didn't sound like that. I said very clearly, this is a bad idea. Yeah. And they said no. And Emilie and I had separate conversations. JJ and I had separate conversations. And ultimately, Emilie wanted to try it. And I said, I will support you. But I said, turn around, don't drown. I said, this is a bad idea.
But that's how decisions are made, because we don't want everybody to think, we talked about families being torn apart. We don't always agree.
Well, sure.
Sometimes we argue.
But when it comes down to it, when a decision has been made, whether you disagree with it or not, Natalie was like, this is a terrible idea. But we still... She supported the decision, and she does. She's not stepping back and saying, well, I told you it was going to be bad. That does not occur. She says, I support you. That's the decision. Done.
Well, I want to ask this question. How are decisions made? Is it democracy, 2-1, or how does that happen? That's interesting.
Well, I have the final say.
Okay.
No, she does not. We do. Well, you got to understand, our household is all girls, and even the dogs were girls. So in our household, our dad was about 6'3", about 280, 250 to 280, depending on my mom putting him on Weight Watchers. And so it was a dictatorship. Okay, but the reality is it's really funny and interesting how JJ slid into dad's lead role, because mom even sees her like that. Because my mom very much is we're old school Baptist. And so the man is the head of the household, but I do love the hold the woman's the neck thing. And, but I think decisions are made through discussion, and we are allowed to be authentic and honest and not sugarcoat it. And we may, and it's not an argument, but you have a discussion and you put all the points out there and then you come to an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
As that's what it should be. And nobody should not walk away mad. You can be like, I think they've lost their mind, but you know what? And this is the part about the husbands, Lance. We may go tell the husbands what's going on, but they're not allowed to comment about any other sister. They're like, we can argue about each other, but thou shalt not speak an ill word of a sister.
Yeah.
That is the 11th commandment. Don't say a word about a sister.
Do not talk poorly about Emily. Like, I may be mad at her, but you don't get to talk about her.
That's my sister. I get it. Believe me. So I want to wrap this up, guys, with a couple more questions. First, whose idea was it, or who's taking credit for starting the podcast?
That's all Natalie.
All Natalie.
What inspired you to start it? What was the genesis behind it?
I had never listened to a podcast. And I saw on Facebook, I saw something about podcasting. But when I came back from my husband, we went to New York for him to receive cancer treatment. And I came back, I felt completely lost. And I did not know about caregiver grief. And I was so unsettled. And I was running a healthcare agency in Virginia, but I just couldn't. And I was doing everything I was supposed to, but I felt so lost. And I didn't realize what caregiver grief was. And I thought we talked about reluctance. I had talked to a publisher about writing a book because I had used the Caring Bridge to journal my entire experience, which had been so therapeutic. And I thought, what's an extension of journaling? Because again, I work in the mental health field, and I thought we should talk because talk therapy works. And so I said to Emilie and JJ, I was like, dude, I said, I saw this thing on Facebook about taking a class to learn how to podcast. And I'm like, I think I want to do a podcast. And I was like, do you want to do it too? And JJ was like, sure. Okay. And I said, let's get Emilie. Okay. And so we were like, let's do a podcast. We had no clue what we were doing. And so we started we said, we're going to create a business because we thought, well, if we're going to start a podcast, we've got to, probably have
social media.
So then we had to have social media. But then we were like, well, we need a website. And then it just all spiraled in a matter of like 3 to 4 months. And we now have are on 5 social media sites. We have the podcast, we have the website, and we partnered with a national benefits group to try to get discounts for people. But in the end, the common denominator for all of us is that we have servant hearts. Yeah, and we want to help others. And our goal is simply to help others. And so we come to the podcast and we figure, most people think of aging and they think of caregivers and they think that they just think of them as like stodgy and not cool. And we're like, well, we're young. Like, look at us. Nobody looks like us. We're caregivers. Nobody looks like us. And we didn't even know we were caregivers in the first place until I was told I was a caregiver with my husband. I never even thought of myself as a caregiver for my mom, a long distance caregiver for my mom for 11 years. I wouldn't have seen that because I was just a daughter.
And how do you guys decide on the topic? Or do one of you do one episode, or do you get approval for the topic, or do you just whatever you want to talk about?
We talk with caregivers or people that are specialists in the industry, and almost everyone that's in the industry their story is what roots them. That's what, all of what their path is based in. And so we talk to people, we find people, and they themselves have been so therapeutic for us. And we all 3 do it the majority of the time, unless Emilie has run into an issue in the morning, like mom will not get on the bus, girls. Yeah. And so that is usually her best excuse. Mom will not go to the day center today. She's refusing to get on the bus. I got to take mom to the day center. That's the best excuse we've had so far. Yeah. Emilie, but we all 3 do it. And we talk to people. It's therapeutic for us, but people love to tell their story. And Natalie says it, people just want to be heard. But what they share is it other people need to hear it. Like, it's okay. Your parent may not like you. Your husband may be mad at you. They don't, Mom complained the other day when I was there, I didn't brown her pot pie correctly. Well, I'm not the only one. I mean, other caregivers are hearing that same stuff. You didn't make, the chicken salad
You
right.
didn't do this right enough.
Yeah.
I'll say this though, the topics are not, so the fact that we didn't recognize that we were caregivers is really what it focuses around, is who are caregivers. And the Rosalind Carter says it best, we're all caregivers. Yeah. And so we're trying to find individuals who represent caregivers. So it's not just everybody, a daughter, a son, whatever. It is a spouse. It is a care for a person with intellectual disabilities or adult who have different abilities. So we try to diversify the individuals, and it's not always the same. And honestly, these folks come on, and like the last one, JJ and I are like snot tearing and all kinds of great stuff. I mean, it was fantastic. We get blessed so much from it. It's
a blessing.
It is. It's healing. So
it makes us feel like we're not alone. Like, I'm not alone in this. They've had the same experiences and feelings that, I'm not crazy. It's just part of it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Hey, me too. I said something ugly too. Me too. Or my mom doesn't like me either.
Right.
Me too.
Yeah. It's okay.
Well, yeah, it gives you a sense of community. It really does.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question, it's a two-parter, and I'd like each of you to answer this. Give me one of your most memorable experiences caregiving for mom, or even your spouse, Natalie, and give me one of your your worst experience or memory of being a caregiver.
I can start.
Obviously, I'm going first because
go for it.
Do it, Em. The baby goes first.
We have this routine every afternoon of watching Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy together. So I think there'll come a time where I'll never look at it the same, because we're there, goofing off and trying to play the game together. Those are our most bonding times. We did go to JJ's wedding, so that was about a 6-8 hour drive, and I was the full-time caregiver. So that was intense. The hardest is stepping away as a daughter and becoming the caretaker. That I have to leave a lot of those emotions to the side. Like, this mentally is not my mom anymore. She can't nurture me. It's my turn to help her as much as I possibly can. So that's the hardest part for me mentally, is stepping back, that she, as JJ said, meet her where she's at. Mm-hmm. And that's made me, it's been tough.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go next. So for me, one of the funny, it's actually the same car ride, basically. It was when she had her episode on the way to Florida. It was being totally ill prepared. And having to stop and get her POA in Atlanta, and hoping that, she was going to be fine when we went in, because we didn't have a power of attorney and I was on the way to the hospital. And so we go in, we're at the UPS store on a Sunday, and my husband's there with me. We go in, and thankfully she goes in, she signs it, and I pay the people. But when I get outside, I've made it through this, thank you, Lord. But when I get outside, she has her cane, and she is twirling it and throwing it in the air like a majorette at, the University of Tennessee. And my husband's standing there like, we just had to carry her in the UPS store, and now she's twirling her cane.
Wow.
So that was definitely a bad, like, I hope I'm prepared, and that's Parkinson's. That's like on and off and on and off. And that's our life, is on and off and on and off. It's a juggling routine. So that was a laugh and a cry, like, Lord, let this work. And then, she'll be fine. Just throw her back in the car. So, yeah. Nat.
I'll go a different angle, because I'll go with my husband.
Yeah.
Well, the hardest part was the loss of our relationship as a husband and a wife, because my husband had a head and neck cancer. And so I told Emilie at one point, the times I would sit outside and while he was in appointments or getting scans, and I would cry to her on the phone, and because JJ was working. No offense to JJ. She was working. So Emilie was my person at times. And so they all supported me in the way that I needed to be supported. But the loss, I had 40 job titles. When I say you are, utilization review, I did everything. I was an advocate. I was everything to him, but I didn't feel like a wife. And it honestly took me months and months after we got back to find our new normalcy. The loss of your old life and acceptance of your new is the hardest. But I want to leave us with a positive. The positive is in those moments that it was so awful. It was so awful. We would walk a half a block because that's all he could walk. And we'd walk to the park on 57th Street in New York City. And we would sit on the bench and he could only stay outside for about 15 minutes. And we would pretend that we were just tourists. And so those were the moments where we connected. And in those moments, I encourage everyone in your hardest moments, find the glimmers that help you to connect with the person that you love because you originally loved them. Even in the hard, you always loved them. So that's my favorite spot. And I have a picture that we took a selfie. And the t-shirt that I had on was connection over compliance. It's my favorite t-shirt because it is about connection.
Right.
So find the glimmers in your day, the moments of joy.
That's a great way to end it and a great piece of advice. And hopefully your husband is doing all better now.
He is 100% cancer-free.
Wonderful. Praise God.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Very blessed.
Well, I appreciate all three of you ladies and the work you are doing. I cannot wait to see where you guys go with your stories. It's exciting and you're just a pleasure to speak with. And if we can ever do anything to help support you, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. And hopefully we'll have you again maybe in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to JJ, Natalie, and Emilie from Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.